Christmas, and for, well, probably about the 56th time on this channel, I'm doing a video indoors that I meant to do outdoors. I think you can probably guess why.
Oh my god, ow! Cheating needed the sunglasses.
No. No. Just the hot chocolate now and the cake.
So yeah, we just went and ate cake, basically, which it turns out is better than standing in 50-mile-an-hour winds and dealing with hailstones. Also, I don't know if you noticed that bandage on my arm. Quick top tip for you. A couple of weeks ago, I was bitten by about 20 ticks, which wasn't much fun, but we got all of them out except for one in my arm, which wouldn't budge. So we used magnesium sulfate paste, which you just sort of smear on and then bandage up for a couple of days, and then it came out, which was perfect. So now I just have to hope that I don't get like Lyme's disease or something. Ugh. But anyway, in other news, I'm very proud to say that this video is sponsored by Squarespace. So if you need a website or an online store or a domain, head to squarespace.com/James, /James, I love that. First name. Yeah, /James for 10% off your first purchase. Now today's video, you might have noticed, is very similar in title to a video I did 3 or 4 months ago called, I can't remember exactly what it's called, but something similar to this. And that video, if you've not seen it, I'll link it here, was all about how beginners, typically, I find, not typically, but in many cases, spend way too much of their money on a first and second camera, and therefore they've got no money left for like traveling or location scouting or anything interesting, and therefore they sit in their houses with their really expensive cameras trying to take interesting photos of like their furniture and stuff, which is not good, rubbish, and it shouldn't be happening. But since I filmed that video, a couple of things have happened. A, I've thought of lots of other beginner mistakes, and B, that video's got quite a lot of views, and I thought, well, clearly that topic is of interest, and if I've got lots of other things to say about beginner mistakes, then I can maybe make that into like a little mini-series, which is what this is. Well, the second episode of the mini-series. Hopefully it'll have more than 2 episodes. It won't be much of a series, if not. So this video and this mistake has absolutely nothing to do with cameras and everything to do with composition. So when I was up that mountain for a good 25 minutes the other day, I got a couple of shots to try and demonstrate what I'm about to talk about. So let's look at this image, which I think is fairly akin to what I see a lot of the time from beginners. And what I mean by that is that in this image, all I've really done is pointed the camera directly at Emily so that she's right in the middle of the frame, and I've chosen my focal length and where I stand based on making sure that she's like a reasonable size in the frame, and I've given absolutely no thought to anything that's around Emily. Now, in this instance, I don't think it's a terrible image, to be honest, which doesn't really help my point, but I mean, there's lots of pretty heather around, and there's a nice streak of light on the mountain in the background, but that's not because of anything I've done. I've just got lucky that we're in a nice location. Now, had we been stood somewhere less interesting, then, well, this would be an even less interesting image. So anyway, 3 or 4 minutes later, after I'd given some thought to what else I could include in the image to make it a bit more interesting, I got this. Now, I don't know if you saw a video that I did a few weeks ago, can't remember what it was called. I'll link it here. It was a video where I was doing critiques of other people's photos. And one of the things I was talking about was about how I judge a good photo. And I was making the point that, to me at least, a good photo, more often than not, is about something, not just of something. Now, this first image, to me, is very much just an image of Emily. Now, it's not a terrible image because Emily looks quite nice and she's in quite a nice setting, but it's very much of Emily. It's not really about the scene or anything to do with the scene. This second photo, I think, at least for me, is more about something. So you've got these really moody rocks in the foreground, you've got a really moody sky in the background, which is causing a real dark shadow on the moody mountains in the background. And obviously there's this really nice streak of light that's still there from the first photo I took. They found me. In the midground, you've got Emily with a sort of flowing hair, which is kind of showing how windy it is, and you've got all the nice heather and other kinds of flowers that I don't know the names of. So yeah, photography, all completely subjective, but to me, this image is more interesting than the first image, all because I've given some consideration of what to include or exclude from the frame, other than the subject. I think I got one other example of this. So yes, here's Emily sat on a rock, kind of gazing into the distance. And again, it's not the worst image in the world, but not because of anything I've done, it's because we're in quite a nice, interesting scene. 3 or 4 minutes later, I came up with this, which I think tells more of a story than the first image. Now, I do need to say that I was only on this mountain for a short period of time, and I didn't quite get all the images that I wanted to, or all the kinds of images I wanted to make this point. And the two examples I have got, I've used quite a similar method to get a reasonably similar result. So I've basically just taken myself back from the subject and got the camera low to include more foreground. Now I don't want to come across like that's the answer to a good photo, getting away from your subject and getting the camera lower. It's not. And in many cases I'd say do exactly the opposite. What I am trying to say is that spending some time thinking about what else you can include in an image in order to tell a better story is always time well spent. And if you're spending 100% of your time only thinking about the subject, then the chances are you're not making an image that's as good as it could be, or as interesting as it could be, or is about something as much as it could be, and is instead more of something. Again, just like last time, I don't know if that makes sense to everyone, but hopefully it does. So yeah, thank you very much for watching. A couple of bits of housekeeping. Not really housekeeping, but just news really. In 2 days' time, Emily and I are heading up to Scotland for a bit of a holiday. Unfortunately, I've got lots of work to do, so I don't know how much of a holiday it's going to be, but hopefully I'll have time to make 1 or 2 videos. So with all being well, see you in Scotland. And the second thing I was going to say is a couple of months back now, probably a couple of months back, I made another video about Instagram and whether Instagram was killing photography. I'll link it there in case you haven't seen it. And basically my point in that video is that quite often people are looking at photos of really good, successful photographers on Instagram. They're seeing that they're getting loads of likes and they're trying to replicate their photos. And what that's leading to is basically just a massive echo chamber of a social network where everyone's photos are looking more and more similar. And anyway, in case you've got no interest in watching that video, in which I was also hampered by the weather, I found an Instagram account this week. Can't remember the name of it. I can't find it now either for some reason. The name's here, Insta Repeats or something, and basically that account, wherever it is, makes the point perfectly for me. Each post is essentially a collection of images that all look very similar from different photographers, and yeah, that's basically the point I was making in that video, so check it out if you want. But anyway, I'm waffling now. Thank you very much for watching, and again, thank you very much to Squarespace for sponsoring this video. I've used Squarespace for years, and as a photographer who basically relies on a website to bring in business, Squarespace has been perfect for my needs. And in fact, before I was a photographer, I was a content marketer, and I spent 4 or 5 years trying to get to grips with coding. And by the end of that little career that I had, I wasn't that bad at coding. I mean, I wasn't what you'd call great, but I could kind of get by. And one of my biggest bugbears was trying to work out how to upload images to a website so that they look good across all devices. So for example, if you want an image to look great on a 32-inch screen, you need to upload quite a big image. But if you only upload that image, then it's going to affect things like load times. It's probably not going to look great on a phone or an iPad and all that kind of stuff. So I was always a bit stumped by it. With Squarespace, you upload one image, and from that, it creates a load of different images for loads of different screen sizes. It's perfect, it seems to work flawlessly, and it means that I don't have to worry about an art director or a client looking at my website on a phone and just finding that it's no good, or it's taken ages to load, or the images look a bit odd. I know for sure it's going to display my work how I want it to, which is a big weight off my mind. So if you need a website or an online store or a domain, head to squarespace.com/James for 10% off your first purchase. Thank you very much, Squarespace, for sponsoring this video. And thank you for watching. I'll see you in Scotland, so long as I get my work done.